The live stream has started.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining the November 2023 Urban Forestry Commission meeting. Before we get to the agenda, we'll go through our usual round of introductions. And today I'm going to start with our newest member, which we're very pleased to have on board, and ask him just to give a brief background on himself. So, Chris.
Hi, well, thanks for having me. My name's Chris DiFiore. I lived in Asheville I graduated from Warren Wilson College and lived in Asheville for 9 years, mostly working in education at that time, teaching environmental science and working with Outward Bound and Franklin School of Innovation. And then I took a trip for 3 years to get my master's of forestry at Yale. And while up in New England in that area after studying at Yale, I worked for the Nature Conservancy and I worked for the some urban forestry organizations up in that way. And at Yale, I studied mostly urban forestry. So now I'm back in the area and excited to get involved in everything urban forestry and see what's possible.
Well, welcome. We're pleased to have you. Zoe?
Zoe Hoyle, Urban Forestry Commission, former employee of the U.S. Forest Service.
Cecil?
Oh.
Absent.
He's not here. Did he indicate to you that he wouldn't be here, Jackson?
I haven't heard anything. I was going to shoot him an email real quick.
Okay. Sharon?
Hey, everybody. Sharon, Urban Forestry Commission and representative of the Technical Review Committee.
Ed?
Good afternoon. Ed Macy, Asheville Greenworks, Urban Forestry Commission representative.
Chardon?
Good afternoon. Chardon Dietrich, Urban Forestry Commission.
And Karen?
Hi, everyone. Karen McNeil, Urban Forestry Commission member, and I also went to Warren Wilson, and my background's that of a registered nurse with a master's in public health.
Good. 2 Warren Wilson alums. Kim? She here? Kim Roney?
Also not on the call yet. I'm shooting her an email as well.
Okay. So we'll move on to city staff. Keith?
Keith Aiken, Urban Forester.
Nancy?
Nancy Watford, zoning supervisor, urban planning and design.
Jackson?
Jackson, planning technician with planning and urban design.
Chris?
Hey, good afternoon. Chris Collins, Land Development Manager with Planning and Urban Design, and I'll add to your Warren Wilson alum, guys. So.
Wow. Okay. Is Stephanie on board? No. I saw Vidila earlier.
Hi, Vidila Satvika, Planning, NYU alum.
Okay. Is Chad here?
I am, Patrick. Chad Bandy, Streets Division Manager in Public Works.
Okay. Is Ben Woody here? No. Sarah Miller?
Hi, Sarah Miller with Asheville Greenworks, Community Forestry Coordinator.
Thank you. Anyone else that I may have missed? Please shout out.
Hi, Patrick.
Oh, Mark.
Hi, Urban Forest Council.
Sorry.
Mark Foster, City Arborist.
There you go.
Department.
Thank you, Mark.
And I'm here late. Sorry.
Oh, there you are, Cecil.
Cecil, yeah. Yeah, you know, it would be helpful, I think, to have some kind of an email or a text shortly before the meeting with a link. I've been spending.
I meant to
10 or
send that out
15
this morning. It misslipped my mind. I'm sorry, Cecil.
Okay, I just spent 10
I
or
had a
15
feeling I
minutes
missed.
trying to find the link.
That was my bad. It was on my list to do, and I just didn't get to it. I'm sorry.
All right, thanks, Cecil. Going on to the agenda.
Kim Roney's also jumped on the call now as well.
Kim, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon. Kim Roney, Asheville City Council Liaison to your Urban Forestry Commission.
Thank you, Kim. So we'll move on to the agenda. The first item is the approval of minutes. I hope everyone had a chance to review them. If so, I will entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the October 2023 Urban Forestry Commission meeting. Is there any discussion? If not, then I will call the roll. Chris, I know you weren't here in October, but under our policy and state law, since you're on the commission now, you must vote.
Got it.
So do you vote aye or nay?
Aye. So
Okay.
are we doing like thumbs up usually, or how does that all work?
No, I go through the roll.
Okay.
Zoe,
Aye.
Cecil,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Chardon,
Aye.
and Karen.
Aye.
Okay. Item 2 is public comment. Jackson, do we have anybody on the line?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. And there is no alternative compliance case on the agenda for this month. So we'll move into staff reports. City Urban Forester, Keith.
Yeah, so I'll kind of keep this brief. I did write down a few things from August and September since I didn't report on those. But for this month, it's actually been kind of just business as usual sort of thing. Met with Stephanie to kind of focus in on a few project topics. The IRA regranting, the fee and lieu policy, the project charter, which I really need to get rolling on, and the RFP for the master plan. Those are going to be the 4 things that we're going to be focusing on here this month and next month. Other than that, we've done some staff retreats, for the planning and urban developments. If a lot of you don't know, the Mountain X interview finally came out, I believe, and it was October. I forget what issue that was. And if you're really paying attention, you'll notice that my first cartoon came out a week after that, which was a very interesting one. We couldn't really figure out what it was all about, or, it was just kind of a strange sort of thing that came out. But anyway, I've gone through some grants policy training with Tom Downing, got that system rolling now. Did another interview with a news agency called Route 50, which is mainly for government professionals, news source for government professionals and ordinance language, that sort of thing. Let's see, some procurement trainings and upcoming, a lot of good stuff. This week, I have the Historic Resilience Workshop happening tomorrow. And then I have a LiDAR land use planners training coming up on the 9th as well. And other than that, that's really about it. Any questions?
Cecil?
My sympathy regarding Mountain X cartoons. I went through 8 years of that.
Well, I didn't understand it when it first came out. I was just like, I don't know. It just didn't make any sense to me. But and then I asked a bunch of other people, and no one else could make any sense out of it. So, I just take it. I think it's.
I get that.
I think it's like a positive thing. It's just like, okay, someone's actually, using me as artwork. So I feel, kind of, good about that in a way. At least I'm getting noticed, and I have something to address in the future.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Keith? All right, thank you, Keith. Mark Foster?
Hey, it's been more or less the usual sort of stuff. Work on city trees and roadside vegetation management. It's been a little slow in the storm department. I'm not really upset about that part as far as fallen trees across the roads and so forth. But I sure could use some rain. I spent the morning watering the trees that were planted this spring, trying to keep them alive. So not liking how things are working out with regard to that, because toting 5-gallon buckets of water around it gets painful for my old shoulders after a while. Other than that, pretty much normal stuff.
Hey, Mark, this is Kim. I want to say thank you for being out there watering the trees. I know it's really easy to forget that we need to keep our trees alive too.
Yeah, there is definitely that follow-up work that has to happen.
Any other questions or comments for Mark?
Oh, thank you, Kim, though, before I miss the opportunity to say it.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it as always. Tree canopy preservation ordinance report, Nancy.
Yep. Do y'all have any questions?
Yes, I do. What's the parentheses?
It means that it's been assessed but not paid.
Is that several or one or?
That's
a lot of money, so that's got to be several, I would say, but not sure.
It may just be one.
Really? It's a whole load of money.
No, it's two. That's
It's
two.
Two. Okay, thanks.
Is there usually a time lag between assessment and payment, Nancy?
Yes. We will, like, once it's approved, we'll assess them when it's approved, and the plans are approved, and then they have to pay it before we issue the permit. So if there's a time lag between them for bids and other things, or for whatever reason, that someone chooses to hold off on the start of a project, then that's often what we see. And then sometimes the projects die altogether. So, and so I can track all of that information though. So.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Nancy?
I'll say, and then other times they will also amend their plans, sometimes to do some additional planting, or if they figure out they can preserve some or something. So it's always a little bit of a moving target.
Okay, thank you, Nancy.
Cool.
Then we'll move on to old business. The Patton Avenue Street Project update, Chad.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. If possible, can I share my screen just so I can point at
Yes, yes.
things here.
I'm going to add you as co-host. You should be able to present your screen.
Okay, let's see. All right. So just a quick refresher. I think everybody probably knows, but for the benefit of somebody that may not have been here. Last month, we talked about the potential for a Patton Avenue sidewalk project with community development block grant funds. At that time, we had not gone in front of city council to get approval to expend those funds, not just on this project, but various ways. Some other strategies that don't involve sidewalk. But what I'm specifically looking at is the sidewalk project. So what we're doing is it's on Patton Avenue, both sides, north and south, from Ashland Avenue. No, sorry, my cell phone. From Ashland Avenue through to Cox Avenue here. And when I was here last month at the UFC, a couple questions asked, and still don't know if I got sufficient answers, but that's what I want to come back to you all today with. One was, can we plant less so that we get less or get healthier trees? Was one of the questions. Certainly open to that, and I want to show one idea I had. So if you see this area here, this is directly across from First Citizens Bank. There's a line of 4 trees that are all relatively close together right here. And I'm going to drop down to street view so you can see a little better too. Specifically, these 3 trees, this one, and this one, I wanted to look at the possibility of making a interconnected pit, if you will. Wouldn't necessarily be a suspended pit, silver cell or otherwise, but they would be connected. And I'm not going to the 4th tree, and this is actually a new photo. This guy was not here previous times when I've looked at this area. So unfortunately, you can't see it, but there's a 4th tree right here just past this box truck. But I'm not proposing to include it in this group because it would have to span this storm drain, and not a smart idea to be trying to do that. So I'm really proposing as a potential to this area here, have an interconnected pit. And if I'm going to do something. I'm going to share a different tab now. What I'm just trying to give you some visuals. This is on Haywood Street on there. I say recently completed Haywood Street streetscape, but it's been a few years old now. But where we were able to do these more mulch bed type plantings versus a tree grate planting, what I would be proposing would be something akin to this, but they would be connected in the middle, not separated by these areas. I just want to give that as a visual, something we have done in the last or recent past, so that you could have a visual of that. And there may be an easier way for me to share, less herky jerky here, but I don't know it, and I apologize if I'm making anybody seasick here. So anyway, that run of 3 trees and is it this area right here by the up by the yacht club, Jack of the Woods Yacht Club area. Oh, that was the first one, sorry. This area right here, there's 2 trees. Looking at doing something akin to that there as well. Now, I spoke with Patrick after city council meeting last time, and we discussed 2 things really, and really I'm coming to you all with open ideas here. But because of what you all mentioned last time, potentially planting less, less is more sometimes in this case. I'm certainly open to that. And the species, Mark and I have talked about this a lot before today, but we were originally, we had thrown out ginkgos on this side of the road, but ginkgos have apparently become pretty hard to come by at nursery availability right now. So certainly don't want to promise something we can't get, for one. We also threw out black gum as a potential here. And then we'll spin slowly. On the bank side over here, we are still at this point proposing lindens, because as you can see, these are planted farther off the road and gives them a little more room so we don't have as much truck interference and damage to the trees. So really what I've come to today is that's one suggestion I've had for how we can get more planting area and the potential of less is more there. Ask the Urban Forest Commission for input on that, and also input on species. I'm willing to listen on any of that. So with that, Sharon, I'll start questions with you.
Hey, Chad, thanks. So the examples you used for the 3 trees that are existing, would you remove a tree if you were to do the excavating underneath to allow 2 trees to have more room as opposed to 3 trees?
Well, we're going to have to remove the trees anyway, Sharon, and that's part of where the conversation came last time.
Right, I remember, and I'm the one that said less is more, and I'm in agreement with that. But I was wondering if that's where the examples that you were showing us, that in that particular case of the 3, that we'd have 2 there to get maximum growth out of, as opposed to 3 with the underground excavation that you were talking about.
Right. Well, and that's kind of what I'm asking you all. When I went out there and looked after the last meeting, that was my brainstorming, that I thought, okay, this is a possibility here, a place to get that. So if the Urban Forest Commission said, yes, we'd rather you go back with 2 good trees there, that can have more room to grow versus 3, I'm certainly willing to do that. I'm really asking more of your input than I am saying this is what we're going to do.
This is what you're going to do. So then let me ask you this. I like the size of what were the sizes of those beds on Haywood that you showed us? They look like 4 feet by 4 feet.
They're bigger than what? They're actually probably 4 feet wide, maybe 8 feet long. They're rectangular. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that as well. I mean, that looked like those trees that have, other than the fact that you're going to get, on Patton, you've got all kinds of people, and you've got those little wire things, those wire apertures around it are going to be smashed down and gone in a week.
Well, I know this. We're changing subjects a little bit, Sharon, but Mark and I have had some discussions recently that I would love to be at a point with the in-ground nursery at Azalea that that was all started as a partnership there to utilize some of those trees, but those trees just aren't big enough yet to survive on Patton. They'd be destroyed probably immediately after putting in. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to. So same reasoning as what you're saying about those fences. They're going to take more of a beating out there than.
Yeah. So my opinion on all this is the bigger the bed, the happier the tree. If we can trench underground and make 3 trees work, then I'm all for the 3 trees. But I know realistically, we probably don't have the room for that. So if 2 trees is what we need to get the maximum canopy, I'm all for, again, as I said the last meeting, less is more. It's just, I mean, we only know when we do the work how much we can get in there, as opposed to, I mean, look at those poor trees now. They're like upwelling in those in the holes they're in now.
Yeah, and some of that, as you all know, those trees planted 20 plus years ago, they were planted more of an at-grade style, and they had nowhere to grow without heaving the sidewalk. Whereas the way Mark has been planning for the last several years now, where when utilizing a grate, they're planted essentially below grade.
Mm-hmm.
It greatly delays the heave, which is, at the end of the day, we want to, and whether we have 2 or 3 or 1 or 5 or whatever it may be, we want to plan them the best way for success.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chad.
Sarah, I'll get to you in a minute. Is any other commission members have any questions? Yeah, Chardon.
Hey, Chad, thanks for the presentation. I'm a big fan of increasing soil volumes for trees. I think the thing I wasn't very clear about was, are you planning on having the space between the 2 trees just be a mulch bed, or is that going to be suspended sidewalk?
It would probably, at this point, I think we would, at least my idea, again, it's not finalized. I'm still spitballing a little bit. Would be like a mulch bed between them. It would not be a suspended sidewalk. So when we went out there and looked, we can get an ADA compliant path behind the trees while leaving that a connected mulch bed in there. So the overarching point of these funds for this project was ADA compliance. So we can accomplish that while hopefully getting more soil volume for those trees as well.
Yeah, I worry, like with the high traffic area along that sidewalk, a continuous mulch bed becoming really compacted, and then needing a lot of maintenance as far as adding mulch every year, and then you're over mulching the trees. So my own suggestion would be to think about just doing a suspended sidewalk there, but having continuous soil underneath the sidewalks. I think that would be healthier for the trees long term and less maintenance for you all.
Well, and I agree, where they fit a suspended sidewalk, and I'll just say silver cell at this point, just for ease. I don't know how viable they are here because of everything that's under there and the somewhat limited funding we have here. We could eat up all of our funding before we ever build a square foot of sidewalk with a suspended system. So I don't disagree with you, but it's trying to figure out ways to do it short of that. Try to get the best short of that, if that makes sense.
Are there any other questions or comment? Oh,
thanks, Chad.
Go ahead. Chardon, were you going to say something?
I was gonna, I understand the cost limitations, but the goal should be to have a tree live as long as it can. So I'm just trying to look out for the health of the trees, and
right.
But yeah, I understand the funding complications there. Well, thank you, Chad.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from commission members?
Yeah, I just was thinking about, as I look at the space as one of the most visible spaces in downtown, I was just having wonderings about opportunities to make this a exemplary model for what's possible. And so things that kind of come to mind, and of course I'm just dreaming, I don't know I'm pretty new, so I don't know suppliers, I don't know, there's a lot of factors I don't know about the logistics of this, but I see a storm drain, and so I wonder about the possibilities of bioswales incorporated into the design. And I see, obviously we want more and more soil for things, and I wonder what the limitations end up being with utilities, and if CU structural soil could be an option in the space. But I don't know if there's CU structural soil vendors in this area. That's something I'd have to learn about. So I'm just kind of thinking about, because of this, the location of this being Jack of the Wood, high traffic area, is there an opportunity for this to be a picturesque, maybe even with signage, this is what's going on, this is what Asheville is showing, demonstrating to people, this is how we are planting trees and taking care of our urban environment. So just a thought.
And Chris, honestly, I wish I had Dennis Newbern from our Community Economic Development Office here with us, because he could speak to some of those questions, and I think our limitations with this particular funding much better than I can. But I will make an attempt, and if we need a follow-up, I'll see if I can get Dennis. But with this community development block grant funding through HUD, it has a lot of specifics on what you can spend the money on. And ADA improvements are one of those specifics. And you know, if I'm missing any of those other specifics, you know, please forgive me, because Dennis could probably talk for days about it, where I can stammer for a couple minutes maybe about it. But I get what you're saying, that should be that way, or would be great to be that way. But where this is not a typical CIP funded streetscape project, I think is our limitations on that. Versus it's a lot of, it has to do with a lot of the funding source more so than the desire to do it here. If that helps.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thank you. I'm still figuring it all out. So
I understand completely. Yeah. You came in kind of cold on this, and so no, I get it.
Okay. Sarah Miller and then Kim Roney.
I don't see Sarah coming off mute, so perhaps, oh, there we go.
I apologize if I accidentally pressed the raise hand button. I did not mean to do that.
Oh. All right. Thank you, Sarah. Kim?
So thank you all for the input in the conversation here. I am thinking about one of the things that Chris, you were mentioning is like, this is sort of like an entrance to downtown, right? And an opportunity to be exemplary. It's also part of the conversation we're having about complete streets, and complete streets includes shade and stormwater mitigation, and trees are part of that. So I know we have limitations, and I know we have a timeline. What would help me as I'm carrying forward recommendations as your liaison from Urban Forestry Commission to the full council is if individual members of the UFC, not to the whole group, but if you have some examples of whether it's grading or suspended sidewalks or something like that, that I can carry forward and that we can look at cost comparisons. I know staff is doing it at the same time, but if we have some creative solutions that we haven't talked about yet, that would be really helpful. This is a constant through point where people are being dropped off and picked up and crossing the street to get to the transit center that's on this, like, just a block down the road. There's deliveries happening, as we saw. There's going to be a lot of foot traffic in this space. And so I also hear the concern that was brought forward about, you know, we can just, like, I think Chardon, you mentioned it, we can just put mulch there, but it's going to then be packed down. And I think Sharon, you mentioned, like, if we just put little metal fences, they'll be smushed. Because this is a heavily trafficked area. So I hear those concerns, and I know staff is looking for that balance. So as we're getting ready to make these next logistical decisions, please send me resources that you have. It will certainly add to my understanding, but I think it could add to the understanding of what we would do moving forward, because this is a high visibility and high trafficked area, and can be exemplary within the timeline and the budget that we have.
And Kim, if I could add to that, and I certainly appreciate what you're saying. Ideally, what we would be doing is not starting on that side, the north side of the road, until after the Christmas season. Ideally, we would start on the south side of the road, on the First Citizens Bank side. Right now, the unknown, if you will, is we are still waiting on an easement from the bank, which we could do our work without, but man, it would make things a lot better if we had it. It's with their corporate still. The last questions I had made me, it was some specific questions about time of day, noise level, those kind of things. So I don't have a crystal ball, but the feeling I got was not that they were against it. The reason they were asking questions, it was, okay, let's tie down some, let's know what we're getting into. So I may be wrong, but I had a good feeling they're probably going to sign. So I think that's going to work itself out. Assuming it does, we will start on the south side, which gives a little more lead time on the north side that we're talking about there.
That's
Thank
great,
you.
Chad. And thank you so much for being available to receive and share information.
No problem.
Thank you, Kim. Vidila, did you want to say something?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay.
And Badilla, I want to share with you, I had a 12 o'clock meeting or 11:30, whatever. And I saw your email right before I went to that, but I really haven't had, I know Mark's replied, but Badilla was asking about some of the flexi pave and some other options and prices of tree grates and stuff. I really haven't had a whole lot of time yet, Badilla, to digest your question. So,
okay. Just to bring everybody up to speed, I was just thinking whether we can, thinking outside of the box, structural or the suspended paving systems tend to be quite expensive. So the idea was, what would it cost to put in tree grates? As Chardin was expressing, right, this is a heavy pedestrian corridor. It probably isn't a good place to have an open pit, not only for compaction, but for accommodating people. So, what would it cost? And they're not cheap, but to have the tree grates sort of consistent. Imagine a tree grate from tree to tree. Ed's grimacing. Maybe that's a horrible idea.
Go ahead, Badilla, and then
I mean that's basically one of the ideas that I haven't seen yet. So I wanted to talk about that. Those are really expensive pieces of metal, but we should at least compare what the pricing is with suspended paving systems, and to think through the possible implications.
Okay, Ed.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I think I need to weigh in. I don't think a suspended system is necessary if you can have a continuous soil pit there. There's no reason to suspend the sidewalk. And to Kim's point, there's a lot of good examples out there for high traffic areas and soil volume and trees. I think this situation really calls for well-constructed pavers that are pervious, so that you can, rather than the metal grates, which are very expensive and they tend to constrict after a while, especially if they're not maintained. Pavers are a lot easier to work with. They can handle the compaction. They can allow water to infiltrate. They just have to be constructed so that they don't pull up and become weaponized or whatever. So there's lots of good examples. We can look for some and share it with you all. But I'm really happy that the city is looking at soil volume as one of the critical impediments to healthy tree growth, and I'm glad that you're considering the site for that. I think it's going to make a big difference. You did have a question about species selection, and Chad, do you want us to get back with you on that, or do you want that to be part of this discussion right now?
You can get back with me if you want to. Like I said, we are not imminent ready to go get trees and put in the ground right now. So it's not like, the clock's ticking, but not real fast on us yet on this. So if you all are better served to get back with me, that's fine. I don't have to have an answer today, I guess. But I did want to go back, Ed, something you said. It would make life a whole lot easier on all of us if we had a 12 or 15 foot sidewalk here versus slightly over 8. That's just, it's tight area, like a lot of our areas.
Right, and pavers would lend itself to that, so it would widen the sidewalk. I'm sorry, Chardin, you had your hand up.
Chardin.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say, I like Vanilla's point of thinking about, the metal grates over it. It doesn't have to be that really thick gauge of a tree well, but, walking around other parts of the city and other cities, you see like the thinner gauge, kind of like 2x4 metal grates that are over pits. And I like that because it allows a lot of water and leaves and nutrient cycling to happen in there. Pretty easy to pull off and clean out trash, and still can walk over them and everything, and less concrete. So thanks, Padilla.
So Chardin, just to unfortunately temper some of that, if it's going to be a walkable surface, ADA compliance has to be first and foremost. And I know Mark feels this way, but a slot that's big enough to allow leaves, nutrients, water in is not big and is too big to comply with ADA compliance. So that's a tricky juggling act, just to grates that allow water in versus grates that someone's not going to trip over or get a wheelchair wheel stuck in, or visibility, someone with low visibility with a cane, it could get stuck down in. So all of those things have to be considered. Not saying
So yeah, and I didn't know that. Anytime there's like a metal grate that people are walking over, that's not ADA compliant.
not necessarily. There's some out there. There are plenty out there, I will unfortunately admit, that are not. And some of those have probably been out there longer than I've been alive. That doesn't make them necessarily a good thing, but that's why they've kind of been allowed to stay. If you touch it, you do have to bring it into compliance, though. So
Gotcha. Yeah, that's something I didn't know. All right, thanks, Chad.
Karen?
Yeah, to what Chad's point was my point. The design and specifications has a particular gauge that has to be used to be ADA compliant, to withstand all the other stuff, as Chad said, is old, is not in compliant. So if you found some that's a thinner gauge, it's not on the design specifications manual, it's out of compliance.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, we tried some different tree grates back in the past. One of them was a plastic tree grate, and it was nice and light and easy to manipulate if you are planting the tree, and easy to increase the size of the hole at the zone of rapid taper as the tree grows. But unfortunately, they flexed like crazy. They didn't support weight properly. I know of a few that are in front of a cell phone store on South Tunnel Road, but nobody ever walks over there. And so they've kind of flown under the radar for a while. The rest of them we had to get rid of. And I've only kept a few as a template to assist people when they're planting the tree, because you can quickly throw that plastic grate in there, see if the tree's centered up, and then yank the grate back out. It doesn't weigh 300 pounds like the cast iron ones. And that design, the plastic ones also had nice ample holes to let rainwater in, which I really liked. But yeah, then the whole ADA crackdown, came into fashion. And now a tree grate that is actually useful as far as making a tree happy is now verboten, which that annoys me immensely. But it is what it is, I guess.
Thanks, Mark. Chad, do you need some kind of recommendation from the commission for our December meeting, or can we come back with a recommendation then?
I think a recommendation for species, Patrick, by in December would certainly be sufficient, because we will not be planning before December. So that's that'll get ahead of anything. Assuming all this easement works out and that you or I, neither one, can control that, we will not be working on that north side before the December meeting. So I still think that would be sufficient at that point. Gives you all time to not rush to a decision or to a recommendation. And I still think it does not hinder the timeline of the project for doing that.
Okay, so I'm going to ask if Ed and Chardin and Sharon could get together and come up with a recommendation and bring it back to the commission in the December meeting.
A question, Chad, south side is large trees and north side is medium and small?
Yeah, that's kind of what we're thinking, Sharon. And Mark, please correct me if I misspeak here, but the fact that the south side, the trees are planted on the back side of the sidewalk, and there's a lot of room between the sidewalk and the building, we don't have building conflict there. Plus, it keeps the sidewalk, the tree away from traffic, so that
There's some extra soil as well behind the sidewalk. Yeah, there's some grassed areas where the trees could borrow soil from those as well that we don't have on the north side.
The south side lends itself, for all those reasons, to a larger tree actually being happier over there. Whereas the north side, you have, truck interference, you have building interference. There's prematurely pruning those trees for various reasons. So, want to be mindful of that too.
Right. We're leaning toward ex-current form trees on the north side that are easier to limb up, and they're not going to spread as wide as something with a decurrent vase type form like we've had in the past. Those cause us a lot of trouble with trucks, and it's really hard to keep up with them. But that would work out okay on the south side.
Thanks, Mark. Keith?
Yeah, I just wanted to also mention the flexible paving systems. I guess the rubber, I guess they're rubber tree grates. I actually tried to put it in the chat, but we're not allowed to do chat anymore per legal. So, but essentially it's the same material that's on the playground over there at the Montfort Center. So it's that spongy playground material. From what I've seen over there, it does wear very well. It's permeable surface, and it's ADA compliant as well.
And Keith, just to speak to that, that was one of the questions Davila sent to me that I solved just before my lunch meeting, and I really haven't had a chance to digest it. So that has been brought up. And
okay,
can I jump in with that some more, Chad?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I wanted to know if I could jump in some more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please.
Yeah, we've had 2 test plots, or actually 3 technically. Test plots downtown for what's the product name?
FlexiPave is the product.
FlexiPave. Yeah, that mixture of gravel and ground up tires. And currently what we're using it for, and hope to use it some more, is those trees that are in places where they were planted at grade. And so they quickly got to where we couldn't keep a tree grate around them. And I can't keep those holes topped up with, rock dust or mulch or whatever to keep people from tripping and suing us. So we put in that material in those locations to flatten them off, and it works okay. In the confined space of a sidewalk, though, the wear is actually a lot faster than in a playground environment where you've got a larger area, and so the crisscrossing of feet or whatever isn't as intense as just the, rat trails, across the same few square feet across a tree grate. If you go over to Patton Avenue at the corner of Church Street, there's the bench with the ginkgo leaves, sculpture. It's got kind of a arbor kind of effect. There are 2 tree pits right there that currently are test sites. And if you look, you can see that the side adjacent to the road is nice and smooth and flat. The side that people actually walk on is very bumpy and depressed from constant footfalls, and there's a lot of wear on the material. The concern I have with using that material is that when people step on it, of course, they're compressing the soil underneath, and then the rubber, after compressing the soil down, the rubber bounces back up, and you have this void space. And people step again and again, thousands of times per day, keep smacking down that soil, compacting it. And then the surface you're walking on has this weird discombobulating bounciness. So for the limited area that we're using it in, it definitely has merit, but putting it on a larger surface, to go down the length of a sidewalk or something, I don't know if that's really the way to go because of the downsides that we've discovered with this test site and the test site we used to have over on Haywood.
Amongst those 2 tests, when were they put in, those test sites?
The ones that are on Patton, was that last year?
Okay.
Chad?
getting it's at least a year, if not closer to 2.
Yeah, it's not super long as far as how quickly it's worn.
And I guess my second question to that would be, can you remove them?
Yeah.
I mean, could you just pull them up like almost like a doormat or something like that?
They've glued themselves to the frame that used to hold the tree grate. So you can, with enough muscle and tools and things, you could probably get them loose and then cut them up with some kind of circle saw or something or other, I guess.
Well, I'm thinking if they came up and if they were, just glued to the edge, then, somehow unglue them from the edge, lift them up, put some more soil under them, put them back down.
It's the matrix, the binder that holds the stone and rubber particles together that is what sticks them to any adjacent surface. It's not like a glue was added or anything to hold them in place.
I didn't realize there was an aggregate in there too. I thought it was just rubber surface.
No, this kind, it's a little different than the playground material, I would imagine.
Okay.
It's high grip, and it's a mixture of gravel and recycled rubber.
Okay.
So it's neat stuff. But
to what we've used, I'll put it that way, because it's only one product. It's basically poured out and troweled in place, and then it sets.
Yeah.
There could be another product similar to what you're asking that is a mat that's cut to shape or something. I'm not saying there is or there isn't, but this is trowel in place.
I think that link that Vidilla sent you had it had like a 2-layer system where the big chunky stuff was down below, but there was almost like a sidewalk type of material that went on top. It was a finer chunk of rubber. It could have had gravel in it too. I don't know. I didn't read that quickly, and then I just saw a company that made rubber tree grates and kind of went with that. But I definitely need to do a little more investigation.
And I do too. Yeah, certainly I do too.
We're going to have to move on. So to sort of wrap this up, Ed and Chardin and Sharon will come up with recommendations not only for species, but also how the trees are planted in this project. And Chad will have you back in December and we'll present those recommendations to you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. And thanks again to Public Works for bringing this to the Urban Forestry Commission and asking for our input. While we're still on sidewalks, I think I mentioned at the last meeting that Ed and I had a meeting with Jade Dundas, who is the Director of Capital Improvements Department. And he has agreed to further meet with us to discuss a specific project or process on how the Urban Forestry Commission can be brought into capital improvement projects when there is a potential for impact to our tree canopy. And he wants a further meeting, but they're pretty much committed to bringing the UFC into a process during the initial planning part of a project, and as well as when they're in the design process for a project. So we'll be further reporting back to you after our second meeting with Jade. Any questions on that? All right, thanks everyone. We'll move on to working group updates, policy working group. Ed?
Yeah, there's not too much to report since last month. 719 is pretty much good to go with the one outstanding issue regarding boundary trees. And if Chris Collins is still here, maybe we can talk about that a little bit. I see that he's still on. Chris, I sent you an email after the last month's Urban Forestry Commission meeting regarding boundary tree language for 719, along with an example of a boundary tree agreement. Have you had a chance to look at that, and do you have a response for us?
Hey Ed, thank you for sending that. I have had a look at that. I do have it in front of the city attorney's office to make sure that it's something they support and are feasible with. But I wouldn't have any. I feel like as long as we get a positive response there, we can work that into the ordinance in some way here, and we should be good to move forward at that point. So I will check back in with them today and see if I can get an update.
That sounds great. Thank you. So notwithstanding that, I think the revisions to 719 is good to go. Landscape standards are pretty much good to go. Ironically, we're still arm wrestling with public works and capital programs on soil volume standards. So I was really glad to hear the last discussion about trying to meet some soil volume standards for the trees on Patton Avenue. And we're at the point where last email I saw from Vidilla is that we're just going to forget about holding the city to the same standards that we are the rest of the building, construction, land development community with respect to standards, because the city's not capable of meeting them, primarily because of cost, I think. So there's not much more I can say about that. We'll just have to address this issue as we go through the urban forest master planning process. Chapter 20 is still in limbo. I'm not quite sure why. And Patrick and I have a meeting scheduled next week with some folks in the city to see if we can't bump that along. And I think that's all I have, Patrick.
Thank you. Sharon?
Hey, Ed, my never-ending question that I will keep asking as long as I'm on UFC is the changes in 711.3 on building impact being removed from the new iteration of that, and the compromise of a percentage of trees to be increased on 719. And I still haven't seen any work on that. So I'm not sure if that's part of this process, or if that's going to combine another phase, or what's going on with that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And probably, especially since we have some new members on the commission, we should probably plan with our next meeting to have a complete review of the changes that we're recommending to landscape standards, so that we can all fully understand what those changes are and what the impacts are, all of the cross-cutting changes. So Vidilla, I see that you're still here, and Patrick, can we just plan on putting that on our next agenda? Spending some time and going through all this in detail?
Or how about the retreat? Because, you know, I've sat down with different members of UFC, and, you know, it's a slog. You know, it's a necessary slog, but it is a slog, and that will take up all the meeting. I mean, I won't be around for it during the retreat, but it would be something I could see happening for an hour and a half on a retreat alone, you know.
That's a good point. I think a retreat is a good point to talk about that, and chapter 20 and 719. And, you know, my hope is that we can bundle all these changes together and forward them at once to city council for approval. So perhaps that's the way we should approach this. I agree.
Vidilla, did you want to?
Whatever you guys want. Yeah, I think, you know, we've sort of been a little bit at a standstill, but I think we're ready to move forward with an agreement on how we're moving forward with the landscaping changes. So if you're having a retreat soon, we can talk through those and make sure everybody's on board before we bring this to a public forum for discussion.
Great. Let's just plan on putting that on the agenda, Patrick, for our retreat.
All right, we'll talk about that later in the agenda. I do have to make the comment that I am concerned about requiring developers to adhere to a new tree planting standard and not requiring that of the city. I understand the cost implications there. I just feel that it sets a bad precedent, and I'm also a little concerned about any legal ramifications from that kind of decision. So thank you very much for your report, Ed. The Urban Forest Master Plan Fee in Lieu Working Group, Zoe.
Yes, I don't have anything to report about fee in lieu, but we had a meeting at the Urban Forest Master Plan group on, I think it was August 23rd. Am I right about that, or September 23rd? And Keith was not able to attend because he was in a training. But what we talked about was the two ways that the RFP might go through, either through the city or by establishing a partnership with Greenworks where they acted as sole source. And checking in with Keith, he indicated that since and you can correct me, Keith, if I'm not saying this correctly, but since the funding for the master plan was coming through the general fund, that the city would be doing the RFP. We also offered, Ed and I offered to actually write the RFP, write parts of the RFP, and or edit the RFP for the city. We would also like to see the plan split into two RFPs if possible, one for the inventory and the second for the what is essentially a community education piece that forms the actual goals of the plan. Do any of the other members want to chime in on that? Ed?
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. The reason we were talking about a sole source is because we've been having conversations with the city of Knoxville and the vendor that's been working with them on their urban forest master plan. And it's a vendor that we're very much impressed with. It's doing a great job. And you know, we were just wondering if there's a way that we can cut to the chase and bring them on board to get this project going. So that's kind of where we're coming from on that. If there was a way to grant the money to a nonprofit organization and then in turn let that nonprofit, you know, engage in contracts with a third party, we can get this whole process going by the first of the year. But if that doesn't work out with the city, and it doesn't sound like that is, then we're prepared to help the city cobble together RFPs for the various phases of this project, so we can still get going around the first of the year. I know it's getting kind of late, but we've been talking about it for months now. But it's really time to start putting this thing in play. So whatever we can do, send us the RFP process. We've got the outline already put together. We know every component of the project. We can probably get an RFP put together within a week or two, and certainly by the next meeting.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. So the ball's in the city's court at this time, and you know, maybe you have somebody that works with grants and agreements and contracts that we can work with directly, but we're willing to help and push this forward. So just say go.
Yep. Go.
And point us in the right direction.
No, I have it on my notes, you know, to, you know, get you that information and see how we can, you know, just, you know, kind of let you all honcho that since you're ready to go, and then we can, just bring it back to the city and, wordsmith it and do what we need to do to it and cityfy it and then, get it out. Cause I want to get it done immediately as well. I was hoping at this point to already have awarded those contracts and, have them, on their way. That was one of my goals, but, life just doesn't happen that way sometimes. So, but yeah, so it's going to be a priority here next week to figure out that process and see how you can be involved with that.
So shall I call a meeting of our working group for this coming week sometimes or within the next 10 days?
Sure.
And could somebody send me our new Chris's email address, DeFiore?
I'll send it to you, Zoe.
Okay.
Cecil?
Yeah, I hope this goes forward quickly, but having been the liaison to this committee for 8 years and now been on this committee for 5 years, I see that even removing invasives from the recommended planting list takes more than a decade. So I don't know. Good luck. That's all.
We're pretty determined.
Yeah, good. Good.
Thank you, Zoe. Any other questions or comments for Zoe? Okay, we'll move on. The appropriate species list, Karen.
Yes. So I feel like we're getting to a good place with it. I talked to Keith about it and he shared a spreadsheet with us. And a couple things that I think are worth considering. Phyllis Stiles, who founded Asheville as the first Bee City USA, which has grown to 170 cities and also 157 campuses. I think we should ask her to write the cover letter for the appropriate species list to share a little bit of the special history of Asheville and highlight the fact that we have that exceptional designation as the first bee city, and to also emphasize the importance of planting native species. And so I would like us to be able to include her with that cover letter. And then the other thing that I think we should consider is including a list of a do not plant or invasive species. And this was Sharon's suggestion, but I think it's really important. And she mentioned especially because of the TRC committee, I believe, in order to make sure that those plants are not included as plants that are allowed to count as part of that credit for that process. So if anybody has anything else to add.
I have a question, Karen. The cover letter, would that come from whom?
I think it should be written by Phyllis Stiles. And I've been talking with her about it, and she's pretty excited about the possibility. It's just a matter of if we are able to do that as part of this packet or link or however it will be presented. But I think that emphasis on native species and the history of Asheville as Bee City is pretty important and special to include.
So that would be part of a presentation put forward by the Urban Forestry Commission?
I think it would be more of a included in the ASL as just sort of like an intro to the ASL and a cover letter for that. It could be a presentation, but I was thinking of it more as we had discussed a cover letter.
Sharon?
The idea sounds good, but for me, it's mixing apples and oranges. Only, and my thinking is the recommended species list or the approved ASL species list. When I look at it from being on the technical review committee, is the most people that I see using this that I interact are the developers, and they're complying with our requirement for the city of what we are recommending. them use that we can use as protective, and whomever's doing TRC can say, you know, you've got invasive over here, they need to come out, or you can't use them to protect. And I'm trying to keep everything in line with the Urban Forestry Commission, because that's who's in my world is issuing this, and whom I want the developers to see, because they're responding to whomever is representing the Urban Forestry Commission. Now, do I think that a letter from Phyllis is a good thing? I do, but I don't know whether it should be tied in as specifically to the recommended species list, only because I'm coveted to it. That doesn't mean that there are a million homeowners in our city that aren't looking at this and deciding from our list what they want to plant. I'm looking at it specifically as that I know every developer that comes through and develops in this community is using that list. So
perhaps we can just creatively brainstorm of some way to include Asheville's designation as the first bee city and emphasis on the use of native species somehow in association with this list. It doesn't have to be directly connected to it, but I think that my personal opinion is that we should be emphasizing native species, since the list itself cannot be 100% native species. We're including fruit and nut trees and other trees that are not necessarily native. I think that there should be, you know, just an extra emphasis on why we should be planting native.
I think that having a letter from Phyllis supporting the appropriate species list would be advantageous. I'm not sure whether it could be part of what we as the Urban Forestry Commission put forward as a recommendation, but I will defer to that kind of policy issue to Nancy's wisdom. Is Nancy still with us?
Yes.
Do you understand?
No, what was your proposal?
So Karen was suggesting, at least initially, that Phyllis, sorry, I forgot her last name. Stiles. Write a cover letter using the history of Bee City, USA, for the appropriate species list recommendation that we'll put forward to the city. And I said that I think a cover letter from Phyllis supporting what we submit to the city would be fine. But I'm not sure whether someone from outside the Urban Forestry Commission, if it would be appropriate for them to submit something as part of what we submit to the city. I'm just.
Yes. So yes, and I will say, Stephanie says that we'll get, that we can get back to you, but so yes, Phyllis writing a letter of support would be an appropriate means, but we can, I mean, I think that's we can look at other options. But as far as like the user file that we have for the species list, I mean, the way that Sharon's correct in the way that most people use it is, it's a, you know, it's a resource guide. It's not a, you know, that's the most, I have this feeling that most people will just skip right over it, unfortunately. But it's literally a spreadsheet.
Yeah, if I could help you out there a little bit. So essentially, yeah, that's just going to be a spreadsheet there. If we want to, you know, take that spreadsheet and make it into, you know, more of a booklet or a pamphlet sort of thing, that might be a better opportunity to add that letter in. I know the city of Hendersonville, I just talked to their guy last week, and he sent me their recommended species list, and it's actually a book. You know, it has a little preface to it and all that stuff. And if that's something we want to do, that would probably be the best opportunity to add that letter. But I think as far as just using it as a reference, you know, just having that Excel spreadsheet there would be good. Or, you know, maybe even adding something into the master plan about you know, Phyllis's work on Bee City would, you know, give her a little recognition there.
Thanks, Keith. Is that helpful, Karen?
Yes, that all sounds great.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, commission members. The enforcement working group, and that is Cecil and Karen.
Karen has really done the real work on this, so I would, you know, yield to her on this. You've really made some progress in terms of getting answers from the city.
Well, yeah, it's been a learning process for me, just trying to clarify what the tree removal permit process is and how that information is accessible to people. And what I found is that it's not really very clear. And so I think we can certainly improve upon the accessibility of the information. And thank you, Nancy, for sharing all that information about enforcement and fines. And it was interesting to read about how, you know, a lot of it was people who didn't get permits, and then when they were approached, they weren't really cooperative about stopping work. And so, and I didn't see where fines were issued along that spreadsheet, but that did show how somebody like refused a verbal stop work order. And it just shows me that there's a lot of room for education in the permit process. And also, I feel like transparency in the enforcement process, that if people get fined, and in our code, it says people are fined $100 a day for each violation that's not remedied. I just feel like we have this ability in this UDO and this ordinance, and we get a lot of flack for not using any teeth or having any teeth with it. And we have some teeth that we could use. And I'm not seeing, and I don't think the community is necessarily seeing where the teeth are being used. So I feel like that's part of the education process too, that I'd like us to improve upon. And I did talk to Ben Mitchell, who served on the HRC for a bit, and the Historic Resources Commission. And he's a real estate broker and attorney. And we talked about different ways to get education out to new property owners in historic and steep slope districts. He was super helpful, very knowledgeable, and gave me a lot of information about what we could do aside from contacting closing attorneys with information, potentially offering continuing education to real estate agents so that they know the different areas to be mindful of as far as trees and what they can help educate their clients about in certain neighborhoods. So that's sort of the summary of my update. I feel like we'll have another meeting soon and we can sort of talk about where to go from here.
Cecil?
This, as all of you know, has been one of my bugaboos for years on this commission, that the city pretends to have rules and does almost nothing in terms of enforcement. I mean, and again, to regale you with my immediate neighbor, you know, who slaughtered a forest. causing a landslide that blocked a city road that had to be repaired. And when I brought the committee's attention to that, the city went and knocked on his door and said, that was wrong. That was the total enforcement. That was the entire enforcement, was you were wrong. I mean, if we could somehow get the city to create a law that if a contractor, because in this case it was a contractor, violates the steep slope law, there would be a fine. Imagine that, if there were a fine for violating the steep slope law, wouldn't contractors stop participating in this slaughter? I mean, I just like, duh. You know, if you violate the zoning laws regarding a building, you get in trouble. If you violate the zoning laws regarding trees, you get a naughty, naughty. I've been 13 years on this, and I just do not get it. So that's my 2 cents.
Sharon?
So I get continual emails regarding the muni trees and the remediation of the issue of what's going to happen, where's it going. I got an email saying I sent a letter into the UFC, but it wasn't read. Can I complain about it? Do I have to go before and talk about it out loud, not just send a letter? So therefore, if I send a letter, it's not discussed. And what's going on? How are we dealing with the fact that they made a mess over there, and they say they're going to do this and they're going to do that, but everybody that's over there that's sending me emails goes, what's going on and how's it happening? So to Cecil's point, it goes on and on and on and on. And I've been battling it the 6 years I've been on here. There is no resolution for it. It just, because one, in the beginning I heard we don't get the fines, it goes to the education, it goes outside of our area. And I said, I don't care who gets the money, but for me, it's the stick that stops the people from continuing this action over and over again. You know, the money for me, wherever it goes within the system, has got to be good. Just because we don't see it in Nashville doesn't mean that we don't have to comply with it. Same way with what happened with the muni trees. So what's going on with that? Well, they won't do it again. Well, we don't see any follow-up to that to let the community know. How does the community know what's going on over there if they don't send me interminable emails going, what's going on over there? And I go, I'm sorry, I don't know, you know? So that's day one at UFC, and my next month, last month, is going to be the same conversation for 6 years, and Cecil's been at it longer than I. So I wish you all the luck in the world to figure out how you're going to do this. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Sharon. So I might suggest that the enforcement working group might want to sit down with particularly people in DSD who are in charge of zoning enforcement, as well as someone from the legal department, and discuss these issues with them. So
Karen has really been pushing forward on this, which I very much appreciate.
Yes, Keith.
And I also do want to say that, you know, I'm not, Cecil, I'm not sure of your whole situation, but, you know, we do issue fines. You know, I was out on a steep slope property about a month ago and actually inventoried 36 trees. You know, 13 of which they removed and they were, you know, properly fined for. So it, you know, it does happen. It probably doesn't happen as often as it should, mainly because of you know, compliance officers and, you know, someone like myself to actually go in the field and actually take an inventory of everything that was damaged or removed, which is, you know, for me, it took about 2 hours, but it was certainly a process that would, you know, I would have to train and teach other people to do. And most people just don't have that. You know, I mean, when you have a stump that's, you know, an inch high, I mean, you know, how many people can actually tell you what kind of tree that is? You know, I mean, with a 95%, you know, certainty, I could probably, you know, key it out pretty well, but most people wouldn't know how to do that. So you have to, you know, lay some just general rules down of, you know, a tree is a tree. It doesn't matter really what species it is. And then, you know, kind of, you know, base your fine on that.
I surely hope that things have improved since we've enlisted you, Keith. Thank you.
I think they are improving. It would just, you know, we need to figure out a better and a more efficient system to do it.
Vidila?
I was just going to add that with the landscape updates, you know, the UDO isn't okay. There's operations and there's the UDO, right? But if we're going to be talking about some of the changes to what the UDO says in regard to landscaping, there's a part in there about enforcement. So let's look back at that and make sure that everybody's okay with at least what it says in the code, so that we can base operations on that.
Vanilla, I would ask, how can we move to enforce regarding contractors who violate the law? The contractors, the bulldozers and the chainsaws that come and do the violations, isn't there some way to enforce against them?
Good question. You know, I think let's first review what's on the books and whether that needs to be buttoned up. I think we did this for short-term rentals, for example. We increased fines so that on the code, we had the legal description of what could be charged. And then we figured out how to do the internal operations corrections to make sure that we had some system. I'm not saying that we can figure that out and make it work the same way, but it should work the same way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So in part to answer your question, Cecil, if you remember a meeting or two ago, I gave an update on the situation at the municipal golf course. And the city staff person who's in charge of that had a discussion with the legal department about whether or not to find the contractor who did the tree pruning and removal. And the legal department, for reasons I'm not entirely clear about, came back and said that they would rather have the city discuss with the contractor remediating some of the contract money back to the city to do some work on those trees to repair, if possible, the damage that inappropriate pruning did to those trees. So that's one reason why I was suggesting to the enforcement working group to sit down with someone in the legal office and get an explanation from them about imposing fines on contractors that violate the ordinance.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, if there's no other questions or discussions, then we'll move on to the legislative update. You remember at the last meeting, we had a discussion regarding the two citizen petitioned text amendments to the UDO, one related to flag lots and the other related to cottage clusters. And you all unanimously decided to recommend to the city council that they postpone action on the flag lot text amendments in part due to the fact that you all felt that when it comes to UDO text amendments that could affect our tree canopy, that the urban forester should be part of those staff discussions. At the last meeting, the city council voted unanimously, I think, maybe there's one dissent or two, to postpone action on both the flag lot text amendments and the cottage cluster text amendments until at least their January 23rd meeting. Part of their reasoning for that is that there was no real community or public engagement that happened for these text amendments. And in fact, under the UDO, when a citizen petitions to have a text amendment considered, there is no prescribed community engagement process. So the Department of Planning and Urban Design is going to look at coming up with recommendations for a community engagement process. I hope to be part of that from the Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods, but I would also like to get consensus from the commission to sit down with Keith and Stephanie Munson-Dahl and Chris Collins to discuss a process by which the urban forester is involved in any kind of UDO text amendments that could in any way potentially impact our tree canopy in our city of Asheville. So if I can get that consensus, then I'll work with Keith to see if we can arrange that meeting. Sharon?
You have my vote. I second that if it's a vote.
I don't know that we need a vote, but if people just want to chime in and give their consensus, then that's fine.
I second or third that or fourth.
Okay, well, okay, good. Well, it looks like we have consensus. So Keith, you and I will get together and talk about that and talk about scheduling a meeting with Stephanie and Chris.
Also,
Sure.
I would say include open space with that, because open space is our green space at a lot of the times. So if you can put open space / tree canopy, because I do know that that amendment that was going through has to do with open space as well.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. All right, if there's no other questions or comments, we'll move on to new business. As you all are aware, we have an annual retreat. It's usually held in January or February. I wanted to at least start a discussion here, and I think we've already done that, about what should be on the agenda for the retreat, as well as any ideas or recommendations where that retreat should be held. Sharon?
In person? We're going to do it in person? Are you going to do it in person? I would recommend that only because I would like to attend it, just to listen, because it's involved in 711-3, which I'm extremely aware of. And so I can't remember if our last retreat, I don't think it was, our last 2 retreats have been virtual.
I believe the last retreat or the one before that was held in City Hall. So that'll be up to what the commission would like to do, whether to hold it in person or virtual?
I would prefer to be in person.
Okay.
And the annual retreat last year was my first meeting, and that was in person at City Hall.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't remember.
Anyone else from the commission want to chime in on that?
I know I'd love to have it in person to meet everybody.
Okay.
I think we should have it in person as well.
Yes, I prefer that also.
Okay.
I'm okay
Patrick,
with I'm okay with having the annual in person, but I hope that we continue to do the monthly at virtual, simply because if we really are committed to green in this city, we don't need to all drive to a common point to talk about these issues. It's just even driving an electric car myself, it's like seems silly for us all to convene at a central point. But for an annual meeting, okay, I'm good.
Okay, we're going to get to the monthly meetings a little later in the agenda. Sharon? Oh,
That was my question.
okay. So it came up that we should spend at least part of the retreat discussing more in depth the ordinance changes that we're proposing related to the tree canopy preservation ordinance, chapter 20, and the tree planting standards. Another suggestion was to invite the people from Knoxville, not necessarily the consultant, but the people from the city or the community to come and make a presentation to us. So just think about these potential ideas, because I would like to firm this up by no later than the December meeting. So anybody have any questions or comments on that? And also be thinking about where we might have the retreat. I know one year we had it at the Collider, and of course we've had it at City Hall. So keep that in mind and be ready to come at the next meeting so we can fund.
Reviews going on, and I wonder if that's going to
Might be required to do that. 11th, if we have anything in January. And we can always ask if the applicant wants to wait until our next regularly scheduled meeting in February. Usually they don't.
Okay. Yeah. So you'll check that and let us know?
Yes.
Okay. Sharon?
At the last TRC meeting, we've got one of our applicants is trying real hard to make it to P&Z, and they talked to me about, they have been to us before, which we did not vote on, so it's open-ended, and I think they're going to want to see us as soon as possible if they're on track like they were at the meeting that I was at on Monday. So I'm going to say that if they're still on track like they were on Monday, we will see an alternative compliance on December. I mean, in January. I don't think they'll make December. They're going to try for December, but they're pushing. So just an FYI, if everything for them goes the way they want it to go.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. Any other questions, comments on the annual retreat? If not, we'll move on. An update on the new status of the Tree Protection Task Force. Ed?
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. The Tree Protection Task Force has a history going back probably 6 or 7 years, starting as an advocacy group, and within probably 12 months of that group first forming, as sort of a grassroots movement. Asheville Greenworks started hosting the committee on a monthly basis, and I became the moderator of that group. And these monthly meetings occurred pretty regularly over the last 6 years or so. And the group's weighed in and has helped significantly, particularly as we adopted the canopy amendment and just in general elevating urban forestry issues within the city. Over the last couple of months, a couple of the founders of the group, or couple of the earlier committee members, approached Greenworks and met with some of the staff and discussed this history, and had asked that staff if Greenworks can, quote, return the tree protection task force back to its original founders. The staff approached me with this idea, and I was more than agreeable allowing that to happen. I personally felt a certain degree of burnout trying to moderate this group on a monthly basis. Tried to constantly direct their energy more towards education and well-placed advocacy. And it got to a point where I just couldn't give it the time and attention that I needed to. And Greenworks staff, Greenworks is currently understaffed and couldn't provide the staff support that group needed. So they've decided to spin off basically on their own again. They still plan to meet on a monthly basis. It's not clear whether these meetings will be virtual or in person. The last meeting they had last month was a hybrid. And that group hopes to keep reporting back to the Urban Forestry Commission on their deliberations. So not much of a major change, except Greenworks won't be staffing that group any longer, and I will no longer be moderating it, which quite frankly is a big relief to me. Any questions? Karen, you might have something to add because you attended that last meeting. Maybe you can fill in the blanks for me.
I feel like you covered it really well. It was a hybrid meeting format, and I think that's the goal, to continue that moving forward. And they want to help advocate for the needs of Asheville's urban forest.
Thank you, Ed and Karen. So for the newer members of the commission, the Urban Forestry Commission worked closely with Asheville Greenworks and the Tree Protection Task Force to put on the Climate Change and Urban Forest Symposium that was held in November of 2019 at AB Tech. And I believe every single member of the city council and most of the department heads in the city attended that symposium, and it really did supply the impetus for not only getting the tree canopy preservation ordinance unanimously passed in 2020, but also the zero net canopy loss resolution the same year. So there has been a close history between the UFC and the Tree Protection Task Force. As Ed suggested, they are a clear advocacy group, and we are an advisory group. So to the extent that we have been able to collaborate with them on certain issues has been fundamentally good for our urban forest, but they do take a different track than we do on issues as well. So we'll look forward to seeing how that task force manifests itself going forward, and if there are any opportunities for the Urban Forestry Commission to collaborate with the task force, given the understanding that we have two different kinds of mandates. So thanks for that update, Ed and Karen. Where are we? So just to remind you that I was notified by the clerk's office that at the end of this calendar year, we will have 2 vacancies on the Urban Forestry Commission. Both Sharon Sumrall and Cecil Bothwell will be ending their 2 terms on the Urban Forestry Commission. And under the boards and commissions policy, they have to step down. I did communicate with Scott Alba, who was the other person that we brought forward, Zoe and I brought forward to the commission to fill the vacancy that Chris now occupies. And he informed me that he is still interested in a position on the Urban Forestry Commission. So I will notify the clerk's office, and they will probably either next month or the beginning of January send out notice of vacancies for the Urban Forestry Commission and take applications. And then if whoever is still in charge of the Urban Forestry Commission will consider new applications as well as the older applications to fill those 2 vacancies. Heath?
From my understanding, we did get added to the recent application acceptance email that went out, and they are taking applications for the 2 open positions up until it's 26th, 11/26, so November 26th. They'll be taking applications for those 2 positions that will be opening at the end of the year.
Thanks, Keith.
Yep.
And since vacancies are filled quarterly, it's likely that the city council will not fill these vacancies until probably April, at the end of the first quarter. Yes. Cecil?
Yeah. I'll be sad to leave this after, I think, 14 years when at the end of this one final thing that I want to toss in here is I challenged UFC people to mature tall trees this year, thinking that I would myself plant 4 tall maturing trees this year. And then when I went to price them, I found that oaks and other tall maturing trees were like $150 to $300 each at a local nursery. So what I have learned is how to plant acorns, and I am now planting acorns. First, you float them because acorns that float will not sprout. And so I have now got 4 acorns that are growing here. And so I'm contributing 4 trees to the urban canopy as my end of term on the UFC.
And you can still get yard. You can still get a bag of bare roots for $50. 100 bare roots for $50. So I got plenty of trees if you want some.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Cecil. And just speaking for myself, it's going to be hard to replace both Cecil and Sharon. They've both been forces to reckon with on the commission as long as I've been on it, which is, I think, ending 5 years now. So, there'll be big shoes to fill.
Particularly Sharon's. Sharon is the pro. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll have to have some idea of how we're going to transition from, I guess, Sharon to Keith as the Urban Forestry Commission representative on the Technical Review Committee. So I don't know if you have any ideas, Sharon.
Yeah, I've got lots of ideas. I'm thinking about putting it on the agenda for next month because it is a few minutes till, and I got a lot of opinions. I also have questions for Chris that I asked at the very beginning of the meeting. We don't have time, so my question will hold, believe it or not, till next month. So yeah, I think discussion of TRC and all of that, in my opinion and what I've seen and experienced, should make some meeting time next month. Yeah.
So maybe you, I, and Keith could get together sometime between now and the next meeting and just have a short informal
Sure.
discussion.
Yeah, sure. Just let me know.
Is that okay with you, Keith?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Zoe?
So, Cecil and Sharon, will you be coming to the retreat for sure?
I will for sure.
Can you just give us some parting words, each of you?
Good luck.
Well, more than that, some advice.
I got Zoe, if you don't know by now, I got lots of opinions. Ask Ed. He's heard them all.
I will come to the retreat too. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say that I was going to save it to the last, that when I first got on UFC, I was sitting next to a former member, and I said to him, because which ties into our next topic of conversation, because I did a whole year of in-house meetings before I filled out my application and got accepted, because I wanted to see what UFC was about. I didn't get it. And I looked at the guy next to me and I said, yeah, I filled out an application for UFC. And he goes, why would you do that? We don't get anything done. And I looked at him and I said, well, we'll see. And we have gotten a lot done in the 6 years I've been on. So I proved him wrong, but he looked at me like, why do you want to do that? We don't get anything done, So that's my words of advice, that you get as much done as you want to get done, So anyway.
You are right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sharon.
So when we segue into this, my opinion, and I'm overstepping as usual, Patrick, is I would like to meet in person, for the simple reason is that I've got people emailing me who can't get through to make public comment due to one reason or another.
1 second, Sharon. I just need to update the commission that I have to submit an annual report to the city council in January. Even though I submitted a report to the city council's Environment and Public Safety Committee just a month ago. So I'm going to ask each of the working group chairs to just send me a couple paragraphs of what they've done this year in their respective working groups, and a little bit about what they see as their priorities for this coming year. And if possible, send them to me by the first part of December so I can put together a report to the city council. Thank you. And so the last item on our agenda is I have to notify the clerk's office by the 1st of December how we intend to meet in our monthly meetings next year. If you remember, last year we voted by, I think, a 5-4 vote to meet this year virtually. So we have to decide how we're going to meet next year. I don't think that a hybrid type of meeting is possible because that's a lot more work on staff. So I'll open this up for discussion, and I think we've already had some people chime in on that, but on how they would prefer us to meet next year. So I know that Sharon has indicated that she would like to meet in person, and you want to articulate your reasons.
Yeah, it's for public comment. That's how I got involved, and how I met Bob Gale, who used to be on UFC, and other people that I did not know at the time that were instrumental in working with the urban forest, and they all showed up. Our alternative compliance was in person, and the chair at that time allowed me to ask questions to the alternative compliance people, which opened up a lot more in-depth conversation about building, and allowed public comment into that realm as well. I'm all for meeting in person, just basically because I think more people will get involved. The applicants that are applying for UFC positions can come show up at a meeting and participate in meetings and see what we're about. So that's my vote for meeting in person.
Zoe?
I would prefer to meet in person, depending on if there are any resurgences of disease, which I hope there will not be. My preference, like Sharon, is to meet in person for a variety of reasons.
Okay, Ed?
Yeah, I too would prefer in person, but to Cecil's point, we need to do what we can to reduce our carbon footprint. So I vow to take my electric bike, or weather permitting, or if I have to drive, maybe pick Kim up on the way since she lives in my neighborhood. Try to carpool a little bit, but we should meet in person, mindful of our carbon footprint, and try to reduce that as much as possible.
Thank you. Karen?
I have to agree with meeting in person. I feel like it's part of how we strengthen our community and meet people that can help us with this work. And it's how I got involved too, was coming to meetings in person. So I also, share Zoe's sentiment that, we have to be mindful of our health, but we have masks if needed, and we can cross that bridge when we get there. But I do agree that meeting in person is ideal for this kind of work.
Cecil?
So the COVID count in the sewage here is increasing again. So it's happening. And I won't obviously be on the commission next year, but perhaps a possibility is to do quarterly in person and otherwise remote. I still really think that we need to stop driving to central points to do meetings. I mean, anyway, whatever, that's it.
Chris?
I agree with Ed on the points that, like, I want to be mindful of emissions, but the benefits of meeting in person, especially for myself as someone that's younger and newer to the area, to this commission, are huge. Just to be able to have conversations before and after, to meet new people. I think fluid brainstorming happens in person in ways that just is not replicated online. And so I'm excited for having those creative discussions that I feel like just really, in my experience, have not happened on Zoom in any meeting I've been in. So I'm voting for in person.
Chardin, do you have anything further to say?
Yeah, Chris just kind of took the words right out of my mouth. I totally agree with that, creative brainstorming, and there's some amount of gelling that happens in person that you don't really get over Zoom. And I think that it is a carbon footprint, and whenever we can ride our bikes, utilize that, bike path in Merriman. But I think what we can accomplish as a group, meeting in person versus Zoom would be beneficial to the environment more than just a couple of cars coming to a central point. Romantic side of me to believe that. Thanks.
Kim?
Yeah, just a couple of points as your liaison. I know that we've been hearing about this at the board and commission level, that with the ARPA funds, we were making investments in upfitting some of our spaces for public meetings. And one of the intentions of that was to be able to have more options, such as hybrid meetings. So I know that we're always looking for consistency and reliability, not just to be able to have hybrid meetings, but to be able to have them reliably and effectively so we don't create more complications. I would just suggest that, hearing all of your concerns today, if you wish to be able to have the flexibility of a hybrid meeting, then you could make that recommendation alongside. Unfortunately, at this time, the way we have it set up is that we ask for consistency of expectations, both for yourselves and the public, but also for staff to be able to choose from that binary option, right? It's like either virtual or in person. So that's where it stands right now. But if a suggestion was to consider quarterly or to pursue a hybrid option so that you could have more flexibility in reducing carbon footprint, then that is an option. I will say that as your liaison, I very much enjoy attending in this virtual setting. Because of it, I am more able to attend. So, of course, options to carpool are warmly welcomed. And also, there will be times where I'm not able to attend, but of course would review the archive. So just want to make sure that you know the full range of options, even though you have to choose from the two options. Having a recommendation to expand those options would be something I would be happy to carry forward as well.
Thank you, Kim. So I too would favor in-person meetings. I understand and respect Cecil's position on the carbon footprint. That was also echoed by Ed. But I also think that I agree with the sentiments expressed by Chris and Chardin concerning the ability to sort of more effectively brainstorm in an in-person meeting, as well as Sharon's point about in-person meetings, we hope would facilitate more attendance by the public, and especially people who are advocates of protecting trees and preserving our urban forest. So with all that in mind, I would entertain a motion to recommend that we notify the city clerk's office that we will be meeting in person next year, with a recommendation that if there is a hybrid option become available during the year, that we would certainly encourage the city council to endorse that.
So moved.
Okay, Ed has moved. Do I get a second?
I second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we will notify the clerk's office that we will be meeting in person next year, with a further recommendation that if a hybrid option becomes available, or that we would encourage the city council to adopt a hybrid option and give us that opportunity to choose that if we can. Kim?
maybe I missed it, but to formalize that recommendation, are you going to do a roll call vote?
Yes, I am. So is there any further discussion on the motion as seconded? If not, hearing none, I'll call the roll. Karen,
Aye.
Chardon,
Sorry. Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Cecil,
Aye.
Zoe,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So the motion is unanimously approved. So that brings us to the end of our agenda. I thank each and every one of you, and especially staff, for all your contributions, comments, and especially your commitment to our urban forest. So with that in mind, I'm sure I'll get a consensus to adjourn the meeting, and we'll see everybody in December. Thank you.
Adios. Thanks,
Thanks,
Patrick.
Patrick.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.